Shami has really made it clear that the stakes in what we're talking about are really, really high. And I think when we think about data and the power and potential of data, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, it's a bit like the old the telescope and microscope. It's enabling us to see things we never saw before, and to create new ideas and new problems. Like the motor car and the aeroplane, it's opening up completely new horizons, changing the way we live. Like the printing press, it's democratizing information, and it's also creating all sorts of new materials, enabling new sorts of services. So the potential with data is just absolutely enormous. But it's also a problem, the dark side. And if there's one thing that just sums it up for me, it's our current legislation. If you go to current data protection legislation, there's two key entities. There's data controllers, the organization, and there's data subjects, us. That sums up the problem that we've got about data in our society today, that we are regarded as data subjects. So let's just have a think about this. So I think to really think about the opportunity that we're facing, we've got some fundamental challenges we need to address to realize the opportunities. One of them is the sheer pace of change and the scale of what's happening with data. And you know this more than everyone, but during the Industrial Revolution, the price of energy fell 1,000-fold. Everything that happened as a result of the Industrial Revolution happened as a result of 1,000-fold fall in a core price of a core commodity. The price of data, the cost of processing, storing, transmitting, whatever data, has fallen over 1,000,000-fold in the last 30 years. In some cases, 10 million-fold. And it's increasing ever more. And if we think about the volumes of data that are being created, when we think about the Internet of Things, for example, we're talking about just the scale of what we're talking about is so huge. And if we think about things which burst their borders, think about water flowing through a pipe or a nice stream on a sunny afternoon, and then think about what floods do. What happens when the borders, when the breaches happen? When you've got too much volume of something. That's what the problem we've got with data now. We can't control. Our current systems can't actually deal with the ways that we're dealing with data. So there's another aspect of this, and that is, when we're thinking about how systems evolve, think about a chick and an egg. If the chick doesn't get out of the egg, it dies. Think about a chrysalis and a butterfly. I think we're in a phase change. We're in a change of state about how data operates. And this is leading us to something which is really important, and that is that the way that we organize data at the moment, the current organizing principle by which we organize data at the moment is wrong, is unfounded. And I bet, I don't know, it's so taken for granted that nobody hardly ever thinks about it, and that is that we assume that the only entity that is going to collect and use data is the organization. Basically, a large organization. We have at the center of our entire organizing, the entire organization of the data economy, the assumption, the organization-centric assumption that organizations are collecting and using data. They're collecting data about me. They're processing this data in ways that I don't understand, as Jeff pointed out, behind my back, to do stuff to me, and such as advertising targeting or an algorithm which decides whether or not I get a loan or whatever. And this is a process, this is a fundamental imbalance of power. And so what we've seen emerging in our economy is massive, massive concentrations of economic power. So during the Industrial Revolution, the fall in the cost of energy, Rockefeller came along and he created Standard Oil. And Standard Oil became a monopoly. There was a cartoon of him holding the world in his hand, Rockefeller holding the world in his hand. And then when they broke up the Standard Oil, it created Chevron and Tesco and Esso and Mobil and all the big oil companies that we see in America today, which just came from one single company, Standard Oil, monopolization. Are we seeing the same today with Facebook and Google and so on? Are we seeing similar concentrations of economic power? And likewise, as we talked about, the panopticon. During the Industrial Revolution, Jeremy Bentham talked about the prison, where you could design a prison where you can see every single cellmate all the time, the surveillance society. What have we got? Have we got a surveillance society today? And this is something that's really, really important, because when you think about, say, for example, the way that the oil industry evolved about energy, and then there's this little thing that started accumulating as a result, the byproduct of all the things that we did, and that was carbon emissions. This tiny, tiny thing that seemed to be irrelevant and had just accumulated. And what's happening today in our economy, I think, is that we've got a similar thing. We've got a mistrust emission. Every time something happens with data, a little bit of trust falls away. And so we have a climate catastrophe emerging, and likewise, now with data, we've got a trust catastrophe emerging. We've got climate change happening as a result of the way that data is being collected and used. And then there's something else about the values, the values and the norms that we were talking about. During the Industrial Revolution, children worked in the fields. They worked sometimes long hours. And so then, when they started working in factories, people didn't see any difference. And then they suddenly sort of, actually, well, perhaps there is a difference. Perhaps there's something fundamental going on. There was a bewilderment. There was a dismay. We didn't understand the changes that were emerging. And I don't think we really understand the changes that are taking place today with us. So for example, when we put something on Facebook, or when we input some information into Google, are we acting as consumers, or are we acting as producers? Are we now the producers of information? And if we're now the producers of information, if we as people are now the producers of information, what are the economic relationships that are really going on? Do we really understand the economics of information and the economic relationships? Because if we're the producers of information, then what's the relationship with the organizations that we're dealing with? So there's some interesting and fundamental things happening. And then I talked about the way that we're collecting data about people and using it behind their backs, and then using it to do things. It's almost perfectly designed to be creepy. So psychologists have done quite a lot of research into what makes somebody creepy. Somebody who's creepy gets too close for comfort, emotionally or physically. They get too close. And then you feel threatened by them. Unjustified intimacy, which undermines your feelings. It crosses boundaries, creating a sense of intrusion. With creepy people, you never quite know what their motives or intentions are. And that creates a sense of mistrust. Creepiness is also associated with a sense of being watched. We feel threatened when we're being watched. And so if we think about the way that data is managed in our society today, it's designed to be creepy. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. So all of this, in my view, says that the organizing principles of the way we're using data is wrong. And I think it boils down to that simple idea that data is a tool in the hands of the organization. And I think what we need to do is to understand that there's a way forward, and that simple way forward is to understand the value of data as a tool in the hands of the individual, a tool in the hands of the household. And actually what's happening right now is that there's a groundswell of innovation, of new services that are helping individuals to assert control over their data and to use their data to manage their lives better. and to transform the relationship between individuals and organizations. So there's three different elements of this, and so my background, just to say, is that I work in a consultancy, and we've been tracking this market, and so we've been watching organizations. We're tracking about 600 companies that are operating in the space at the moment. There's about one launching every week because there's a massive gap in the market, and so we're looking at what they do. The first one is simply tools and services to help people manage their own data, to gather their own data, to store their own data, to be able to access it under their own control, to be able to analyze their own data, to be able to assert their identity, to be able to manage verified attributes, and so on, to be able to control the sharing of their data under their own control, under their own terms. And there's many initiatives going on. For example, user-managed access is something which is gaining ground quite a lot, where the individual can assert control over the terms and conditions under which their data is shared. No, you can't. You can only have it for 1 week. You can't have it forever. No, you can't share it with so. So there's a whole new set of services emerging to help people organize, control, and store and manage their own data under their own control. And then there's a second use of data, which is helping individuals and households gather and use the data that they need to make better decisions, to access the data, everything that's all the possibilities of all the options that are out there, all the pitfalls and the risks that we need to consider, make comparisons, consider options. So those sort of services are all about connecting the individual's data with data about the world out there. And then there's a third set of data, which is services that is helping individuals manage their lives better, using information, personal information, to manage your life better. For example, car parking permit. I just need a few bits of data to manage my life data. What about a service that helps me gather that data and share it under my control to achieve a little thing like manage my data or get my parking permit? Or what about a more complicated thing like move home or plan for retirement or go on a big trip? When we think about all the things, all the information things that individuals have to do in their lives, we're finding thousands and thousands of different tasks, all of them which require individuals to gather, integrate, manage, process, share information, where new services are making it possible to help them to do this. And this is changing the way that individuals are acting. So I've just got a sort of a little list: Brave, Midex, MyWave, Key, DigiMe, DataCoo, Pure Profile, CitizenMe. There's hundreds and hundreds of these new services have emerged in the last couple of years to help people manage their data. So when we think about individuals managing their data and using their data to manage their lives better, what we're talking about, if we go back to concentrations of power, is a dispersal of power, is an equalization of power. What we're talking about is a greater fairness. What we're talking about is greater equity and greater trust. And that is the key opportunity here, which is that services that help individuals manage their lives better and which use data under the control of the individual are achieving something which is addressing the core problem in our economy at the moment. And that is a trade-off, the supposed trade-off between privacy and innovation. Because at the moment, what's claimed is that organizations need to innovate. To innovate, they have to have access to data. To have access to data, we have to compromise on privacy. And therefore, so if you want your privacy, you'll have to forget innovation and growth. If you want your innovation and growth, you'll have to forget your privacy. Sorry about that. But actually, when we think about the technology and the services that can be created and are being created to empower individuals with their data, the only way forward is privacy and growth. Services that are based on the organizing principle of people, individuals and households being in control of their own data. And when I look around, what I see is a massive, massive opportunity. This is not a problem. Every problem is a product in the making, a solution, an innovation opportunity. And when I see this innovation opportunity, I think organizations like the BCS have the professional and the skills and the ability to create a new way through all the dilemmas that we've been discussing tonight. Thank you.